Hey everyone, this is Arbalo, and for this video, we're going to talk about our very first object-oriented principle, which is about encapsulation. Now, specifically, what we're going to cover in our video for today is about what exactly is encapsulation. Since this is a new term that you encountered, benefits, ano bang benefit ng encapsulation sa code natin? How do we implement it in Dart? And lastly, when should we use a class? When should a class have encapsulation? Because not all the time that you're going to use encapsulation or apply it to every single class that you create. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started with our first topic. What is encapsulation? By the way, and here's the definition of that. It's basically a bundling of data and methods that operate on the data into a single class. Okay. Now take note of these methods that operate, because we will get into that much detail later on. But for now, encapsulation is the bundling of this data and method. Not just any method, but method that can operate with those data. Okay? Sa class natin. While at the same time, encapsulation is also restricting access to some of the object's components. And to give you an example of this, let's have a real-world analogy. An example of this concept is in ATMs. Have you tried using an ATM? Diba? ATM contains pera, diba? But we can't get it. We can't get all the money inside, because we're only allowed to. Obviously, we have a credit card or bank cards rather. Pasok natin. We're only allowed to pindot-pindot lang ng mga buttons and see the screen or whatever uh, graphics ang nandyan sa sa ATM. But anyway, let's get into our analogy. So, just like in programming, there are certain objects like ATM that hides stuff. And in an ATM, usually yung nakatago is, of course, how much money is inside. And pwede rin account numbers, ng lahat ng mga nagka-register sa bank, and there's respective pins, There's no way for us to do that, unless we could hack the ATM. And then, of course, we don't know how much money do other people have, unless they allow us to use their cards. Yeah, yes. But using your own account, you can't do that. Also, in an ATM, we're only allowed or restricted, we're only restricted to do a couple of things now. And for example, that is withdraw our own money. We're also allowed lang to transfer money to another account, And we can also inquire our own balance kung ilan na lang ba yung natitira sa bank account natin. Yeah. So, I guess that's all. Probably I had missed some stuff, but these are the main three operations that we're only allowed to do. And each of these operations, at the very least, allows us to access what's inside the ATM. Pero limited lang, Diba? And speaking of allowed, to do, here's what we can't do. Obviously, we can't steal all the money inside unless we do some hacking or anything na sasabotahin natin sisirahin natin yung ATM. We can't do that because there are certain security measures to it. Then we cannot also inquire somebody else's balance, account number, or PIN unless we hack it, and withdraw somebody else's money, of course. So, yeah, this is what in relation to our programming, no. Kaya lang naman binote up ko to just to simplify the concept of encapsulation, which is again there are some stuff that is hidden from us, but we're only allowed to operate on those stuff, those hidden data, through some set of operations. And those operations are restricted and limited lang. No? So, yun. Now, how do we apply encapsulation to our code? Specifically sa Dart language. No? So, there are actually two things that we need to implement. No? One is for each attribute, we make each attribute private. And how do we do that? How do we do that? We prefix each name with an underscore. The second is we provide getters and setters for each of those private attributes. And here's an example of that. So, ito yung ibig sabihin kanina na prefix. No? Kasi kung suffix, this underscore should be after sa L ng model. Nasa katapusan siya. But since prefixed man yung sinabi, so we have to put underscore before the name of the attribute. And other languages, no, in other languages like Java, C Sharp, instead of underscore, they add the keyword. As in literally the private keyword, they add it before the string, no. Kumbaga, if this is a language in Java, it should have been private string maker, private string model. But sa Dart, iba yung case niya. By simply adding underscore before the name of the variable, we're making the attribute private na. In the same way, ganun din dapat sa constructors natin dito. Yeah. This pertaining to the attribute, and then underscore, and then maker. Also, no, yung pangalawang point kanina, which is for each attribute na private, we define getters and setters for that. So as you can see, since dalawa yung attributes natin, for each of these, meron tayong getters and setters. One for the maker, then another for the model. And yung syntax niya is, for the getter na method, kung ano yung data type dito, should be the same. Okay. And then, maker, kung ano yung spelling dito, ganun din, but without the underscore. And then, followed by the equals, and then greater sign. Tapos, yun na. Yung variable dito should be kung ano yung spelling dito sa private attributes sa taas. So, ganun. Then, as for the setters, we have the set keyword followed by the name of the attribute but without the underscore. Then, kung ano yung data type dito sa taas, dapat ganun din. So, yun. Ganun lang. Now, for example, if we have like speed is pwedeng integer or double. So, dapat dito din, should have been double din. Double or int. Okay. Now, in this photo or big image that you can see right here, this is actually a Visual Studio Code, no, na editor. And then on the left side, we have two files right here. The car, Dart, which contains the class definition lang sa car, and main Dart, which contains the void main function natin. And as you notice sa line 6, nag-error, no? Nag-error yung underscore model. No? And that is because once we set the attributes to private, no, by adding underscore, hindi na siya na-access directly, just like what we did in our previous video. In our previous videos, no. This will cause an error na when we directly access this one, itong mga attributes na to. And so, in order for us na ma-solve to, ma-fix ng code na to, we just simply followed or we call the corresponding getter of that attribute. Now, itong mycar.model, no, this one is referring to line 16. Okay? Not the line 3, kasi underscore man to, maker, but line 16 na getter model. So, that's why wala na siyang error. Yun. And yun yung mangyayari pag yung attribute is set na siya to private. We cannot directly access it anymore. We have to use getters and setters. Now, ano bang benefit ng encapsulation? Why do we use this in programming? The benefit of that is, number one, you can perform validation checks. And as an example of that, let's say for example we have a bank account na class and yung attribute niya is balance, yung how much money is left. So, obviously, di naman pwede yung balance, yung value niya is negative. It's either zero balance or positive balance. Di pwedeng negative. So, in order for us to not allow any developer to set invalid values sa attributes natin na balance, so we could insert some validation checks right here. So in this case, it's just an if-else lang naman, no? Na if yung amount daw is greater than or equal to 0, then we can update the balance. We can change the value of our attribute, the balance, to whatever value of this amount, like right here. But if negative yung amount dito, yung value ng amount, it's going to print this instead. Invalid balance, balance cannot be negative. So yun. And that's what I mean by a validation check. No? And this goes with other attributes na doesn't allow a certain range of values. Like for example, age. Di naman pwede yung age is negative, no? Negative 1 na age. So if you want the certain attributes na before sila mag-set, the mga developers to set a value of that, you can insert some validation checks here. So as not to allow invalid values sa attributes. And right here, no, in this example, in this slide, no, as you can see, we have sa main method natin, we created an object na count. Yung balance niya is 100, and once we try to tawag nito, set negative 10 sa balance na attribute through the setter nito, which is sa line 11. So yun, magti-trigger yung else condition na magpiprint siya ng error message. So yun. Okay, so another benefit is you can calculate and return derived values. Yung derived value na yun is based also on the value of other attributes. And here's an example of that. Let's say we have a rectangle class na dalawa yung attributes niya, width and height. And although pwede naman din we could add the perimeter and area na attributes, we reserve that for later, no? Yes, you will see. So anyway, as you notice in line 12, we have a setter for the width. Naglagay siya ng validation checks, no? To be sure na yung dapat yung value lang ng width nito should be greater than 0. Same also with height, no? May validation checks dito para to make sure that the height na value should only be greater than 0. Or else, if mag-attempt na magpasa ng invalid value, so it's gonna trigger this else. Okay, so ito yung ibig kong sabihin, yung itong highlight dito, no? na rather than creating a attribute, defining an attribute na area and perimeter dito, what if we could just create them as getters? And then, ano yung, for this example of, for the area, the value that it's going to return is this formula. Yung value ng width multiplied by the value of the height. Same also with the perimeter. So, yun. And there are other examples. Like say, for example, sa person, di ba? Rather than saving the or creating a age na attribute, pwede naman na i-just include lang the name and the date of birth sa person. And what you can do sa age is you just create it or define it as a getter, and then you calculate its age. Yun. Okay, so let's go to the main function, no? Of course, we create a rectangle object, and then once we call, pag tinawag na natin yung getter function or method sa na area and perimeter, it's going to produce these outputs. So, yun. Okay, so last point, no, before we end the video, is when do we apply encapsulation in classes? Kasi again, not all the time that whenever you create a class that you make its attributes private, not, and we include getters and setters. So scenarios where it's highly applicable, no, is when we are trying to enforce number one, no, business rules. Just like what you saw sa bank account, di ba? We want the balanced na attribute na hindi siya negative. So, in order for us to enforce that business rule, so we include validation checks. Another is when we're trying to hide how the data is stored. And examples for that is when you have a list, no, na data structure. So, ang list, by the way, it can be implemented either array or via linked list, no, or just nodes that are interconnected. And so we don't want the programmers, developers to access directly the array or the linked list. So what we want is the developers to access lang the methods niya, which is to insert, to get, and so on and so forth. So yun, pwede. And last scenario is when the class or the object contains sensitive data and we want to protect it. And some examples of sensitive data are personal information, passwords. Let's say you have a user na class that contains username and password. Okay? We want to protect that through the getters and setters. We don't want them to access the raw information, no? Let's say, for example, in Gcash, no, it doesn't reveal the entire number sa entire phone number, only the last few digits, no? So we could implement that sa getters ng mobile number. Yeah. So yun. Now, again, these are the only scenarios possible scenarios, so that we could apply encapsulation. But if the class that you're going to make is doesn't need this, no, wala naman siyang business rules to enforce. We don't need to hide the data structure inside, or or the class doesn't have any sensitive data that we need to protect. So if none of this is present sa class, we don't have to necessarily set every attribute as private and include getters and setters, kasi again, medyo yan, imagine, let's say for example we have 5 attributes sa isang class, no, or even 10 attributes, no. It would be very inconvenient if each and every uh, attributes, no? Let's say 10, no? So, in total, if you're going to create getters and setters for each, magiging ano yan, you have additional 20 functions sa class mo kung yan yung gagawin mo. And that's why, again, there are only certain scenarios where encapsulation is applicable. So, yun lang naman, and I guess that would be all for this video, and I hope that you learn a lot from this. So if you have any questions, or if there's anything that's not clear in this video, let me know in the comments and I'll answer that. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next video, and bye-bye.